This isn't a story about bad customer service. This is a story about what happens when a quiet professional woman is pushed too far, and the person they tried to humiliate holds the power to shut down their entire world. It's about a single mother, an exclusive VIP lounge, and a simple ID badge that held more authority than a CEO's private jet. When Aura Airlines decided Dr. Anaya Hayes didn't belong, they had no idea they were about to ground their own multi-billion-dollar company. Stay tuned, because the karma in this story is served ice-cold at 30,000 feet. The air in the Summit Club, Aura Airlines' flagship VIP lounge at Los Angeles International Airport, was meant to smell like money. A subtle curated scent of white tea and bergamot was piped through the vents, mingling with the faint aroma of expensive leather and freshly polished chrome. It was a sanctuary of sterile calm, a world away from the cacophony of the main terminal. This was a place for the chosen few, the platinum status flyers, the first-class ticket holders, the titans of industry, who glided through life insulated from its minor inconveniences. Dr. Anaya Hayes did not feel like a titan of industry. She felt like a mom, a tired, single mom who had just wrapped up a grueling 72-hour aeronautics conference in San Diego and was now trying to shepherd her 8-year-old son Leo onto a flight to Hawaii for a much-needed, long-promised vacation. Her conference pass, which gave her access to the lounge network, felt less like a key to an exclusive club and more like a necessary tool to survive the 5-hour layover with an energetic child. Leo, oblivious to the lounge's hushed reverence, was captivated. His small brown hands were pressed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, his eyes wide as a Boeing 787 Dreamliner gracefully pushed back from the gate. "Mom, look. The flaps are extending. It's getting ready for takeoff." Anaya smiled, a genuine, warm smile that momentarily erased the fatigue from her face. "That's right, my little aviator. That's the pre-flight check for the control surfaces." She had nurtured his love for planes, a passion he inherited directly from her. While other kids had posters of superheroes, Leo's walls were covered with schematics of jet engines and photos of iconic aircraft. His most prized possession was a detailed model of an Airbus A350 she had brought him from a work trip to Toulouse. For Anaya, an aviation safety inspector for the Federal Aviation Administration, her son's passion was a beautiful, pure reflection of her own life's work. They found a secluded corner with 2 plush armchairs and a small table. Anaya settled in, pulling out Leo's tablet and a juice box she'd brought. She was dressed comfortably for the long flight, a pair of dark, well-fitting travel trousers, a simple cashmere sweater, and comfortable flats. Her hair was pulled back in a neat professional bun. She was understated elegant and completely exhausted. That's when she first felt the eyes on her. A woman with a severe blonde bob and a name tag that read, Carolyn Finch, Lounge Manager, was standing near the marble-topped bar staring at them. It wasn't a glance. It was a focused, dissecting gaze. Carolyn's lips were pursed into a thin, disapproving line. She whispered something to a younger employee, who then glanced nervously in their direction before quickly looking away. Anaya had felt this kind of scrutiny before. It was the silent, questioning look that asked, "Do you belong here?" She'd felt it in university, lecture halls, in corporate boardrooms, and now, apparently, in a VIP airline lounge. She tried to ignore it, focusing instead on Leo, who was now happily drawing airplanes on his tablet. A few minutes later, Carolyn Finch began her approach. Her heels clicked with sharp, officious taps on the polished porcelain floor, a sound that cut through the lounge's ambient hum. She stopped directly in front of their table, her shadow falling over Leo's tablet. "Excuse me," Carolyn said. Her voice was as crisp and cold as the champagne chilling behind the bar. Anaya looked up. "Yes? Can I help you?" Carolyn's eyes flickered from Anaya to Leo, then around their small space as if searching for something out of place. "I need to see your credentials for the lounge." She didn't say please. It wasn't a request. It was a demand. Anaya blinked slightly, taken aback by the aggressive tone. Around them a few heads turned. A businessman in a tailored Brioni suit lowered his copy of the Wall Street Journal. Anaya maintained her composure, reaching into her travel tote. "Of course," she said, pulling out her conference pass and her first-class boarding pass for Aura Airlines Flight 227 to Honolulu. She placed them on the table. Carolyn picked up the boarding pass, examining it as if it might be a forgery. She barely glanced at the conference pass. This conference pass allows for one guest. The guest policy is typically for a spouse or business partner. Her gaze fell pointedly on Leo. "He's my son. He's 8. Anaya said, her voice remaining steady, though a familiar knot of anger was beginning to tighten in her stomach. "I've used this pass with him before, on other airlines. It's never been an issue." Aura Airlines maintains a higher standard for its Summit Club. Carolyn replied, her tone dripping with condescension. "We strive to maintain a professional and serene atmosphere. We have family-friendly facilities in Terminal 4. The implication was clear. Your child, and by extension, you are disrupting the serenity. Leo, sensing the tension, looked up from his tablet. "Am I being too loud, Mummy?" he whispered. Anaya's heart clenched. She put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "No, sweetie, you are being perfect." She looked back at Carolyn, her eyes now holding a steely edge. "My son has been perfectly quiet and well-behaved. We are paying customers, and we are entitled to be here. Please check your corporate policy. I'm quite sure a child guest is permitted." Carolyn's nostrils flared. She was being challenged, and she didn't like it. "I am the manager. I am the policy here. And I'm finding your tone to be quite aggressive. It was a classic tactic. Reframe the victim's legitimate response as aggression." Anaya had seen it 1,000 times. "My tone is direct, Ms. Finch." Anaya corrected her. "I'm simply asking you to honor the terms of my ticket and my lounge access. If you'd like to call your corporate office to verify, please feel free." The businessman with the Wall Street Journal was now openly staring, an expression of disbelief on his face. He knew what was happening. He recognized the ugly, timeless script of prejudice playing out in real time. Carolyn felt her authority slipping. Humiliated at being questioned in her own domain, she doubled down. "I have reason to believe your credentials may not be valid. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "You have reason to believe," Anaya's voice was dangerously calm. "On what grounds?" "Because I don't fit your preferred demographic for the Summit Club." The accusation hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Carolyn's face flushed a blotchy red. "That's a disgusting accusation. I'm asking you to leave because you are creating a disturbance. If you don't leave now, I will have airport security remove you." Anaya felt a surge of hot fury, but she looked at Leo's frightened face and pushed it down. She would not cause a scene in front of her child. She would not give this woman the satisfaction. She began to pack their things with slow, deliberate movements. "Fine," Anaya said, her voice low. "We will leave. But you should know, Ms. Finch, that you are making a monumental mistake. The only mistake was letting you in here in the first place, Carolyn sneered, turning on her heel and marching back to her post at the bar, a smug look of victory on her face. As Anaya took Leo's hand and walked toward the exit, a wave of humiliation washed over her. Every eye in the lounge was on them. She felt like a criminal being paraded out. Leo's small hand trembled in hers. He looked up at her, his bottom lip quivering. "Did we do something wrong? Mommy?" Kneeling down in the busy hallway, just outside the frosted glass doors of the Summit Club, Anaya hugged her son tightly. "No, baby. We did nothing wrong. Absolutely nothing. That woman was just having a bad day." She lied because the truth was too ugly to explain to an 8-year-old. They found 2 hard plastic seats at a crowded, noisy gate. The smell here wasn't white tea and bergamot. It was a mix of stale popcorn sweat and disinfectant. Leo sat huddled against her, his earlier excitement completely extinguished. He didn't want his tablet anymore. He just stared at the floor. Anaya looked back at the exclusive doors of the Summit Club. The monumental mistake wasn't hers. It was Carolyn Finch's. It was Aura Airlines. And as an investigator for the Federal Aviation Administration, she knew that mistakes in the aviation industry, no matter how small they seemed, could have devastating consequences. Carolyn Finch wanted to talk about standards. Anaya Hayes was about to teach her and the entire airline what standards truly meant. Sitting amidst the chaos of Gate 72B, Anaya's mind worked with the cool, methodical precision that made her one of the best investigators in the FAA's Western Pacific region. The initial sting of humiliation was rapidly being replaced by a cold, analytical anger. This wasn't just a personal slight. It was a symptom of a deeper disease. Carolyn Finch's behavior was not just rude. It was a procedural failure. And procedural failures in the world of aviation were something Anaya Hayes did not tolerate. She looked at Leo, who had fallen into an uneasy sleep, his head resting on her lap. Her first instinct was to protect him, to shield him from this ugliness. But her professional instinct, the one honed over a decade of investigating everything from maintenance log discrepancies to near-miss incidents, was screaming at her. An airline is a complex system. If the culture in its flagship lounge was this rotten, what other, more critical failures might be hiding beneath the surface? An attitude of exclusion and corner-cutting in customer-facing roles often mirrored a similar attitude in operations. She pulled out her work-issued encrypted smartphone. She didn't look up a customer service number for Aura Airlines. She didn't open an app to file a complaint. She went to her secure contacts and dialed the direct line for her superior, David Chen, the FAA's regional administrator. It was 4:30 p.m. on a Friday, but she knew he'd be there. David was a workhorse. He picked up on the second ring. "Chen, David, it's Anaya Hayes. Anaya." "I thought you were on your way to paradise," he said, his voice warm. "Don't tell me you're calling to get out of bringing me back macadamia nuts." "The trip's been slightly delayed," Anaya said, her voice devoid of its usual warmth. "I'm at LX. I'm calling to report a potential safety and compliance issue at the Aura Airlines Summit Club Lounge in Terminal 7. The shift in her tone immediately put David on high alert. He knew Anaya. She was unflappable. For her to make a call like this meant it was serious. "Okay, what have you got?" "I was just improperly and forcibly removed from the lounge. By the lounge manager, Ms. Carolyn Finch," Anaya began, sticking to the facts. "The removal was based on what I can only describe as discriminatory pretext. But that's the HR issue. The FAA issue is the operational conduct I witnessed. She began to lay it out not as a wronged mother, but as an inspector. The manager, Ms. Finch, made an arbitrary decision regarding federally regulated access credentials without following any discernible verification protocol. She then escalated the situation and summoned airport security based on her own uncorroborated judgment. The security guard she summoned was an airline contractor, not TSA or LAPD airport police. I need to know if that guard has the proper SIDA security identification display, area training, and authority to physically engage and remove a ticketed passenger from a secure side airport facility. His interaction with us was unprofessional and created a public disturbance, which in itself is a security concern. David was silent for a moment, processing. This was a clever and entirely legitimate angle. Anaya was leveraging her expertise. She wasn't complaining about being racially profiled, though he knew that was likely the root cause. She was reporting a potential breach in federally mandated security and personnel protocols. Furthermore, Anaya continued, her voice gaining strength. The manager's unilateral and aggressive actions suggest a significant gap in staff training regarding de-escalation credential verification and ADA compliance. My son is a minor, and the way the situation was handled caused him significant distress, which could be interpreted as a failure to accommodate passengers with unique needs, in this case families. She paused. If this is the standard of training for their customer-facing leadership, I have serious concerns about what their operational training standards look like behind the scenes. A culture of negligence starts at the top and trickles down, David. You know this. We've seen it before. He knew she was right. They had seen minor procedural issues in one department be the canary in the coal mine for catastrophic failures in another. Okay, Anaya. I hear you, David, said his voice, now grim. What's the status of your flight scheduled to depart in 3 hours? Flight 227 to HNL. Don't get on it, David said firmly. I'm officially tasking you as the lead on a preliminary investigation, effective immediately. We're going to initiate a ramp and facilities inspection for Aura Airlines at LAX. I want you to head to the local FAA airport district office. I'll make the calls and have a team meet you there. We're going to pull Aura's recent training logs, their security contractor's certification, and their lounge's operational manual. Understood, Anaya said. And Anaya David added, his voice softening slightly. I'm sorry this happened to you. Go take care of your boy. Get a hotel room near the airport on the agency card. We'll handle this. Thank you, David. After the call, Anaya gently woke Leo. Hey, sleepyhead. Change of plans. We're going to have an adventure at a hotel tonight and fly out tomorrow. Leo, still groggy, just nodded and let her lead him toward the terminal exit to find a taxi. As they left, Anaya's phone buzzed again. It was a secured email from David's office. Attached was a formal document, FAA Notice of Compliance, Inspection, Case. LAX, 2025, 808, Aura 1. Her name was listed as lead investigator. The wheels of federal oversight were beginning to turn. Meanwhile, back in the Summit Club, Carolyn Finch was preening. She was recounting the story to her subordinate, Brenda, embellishing her own role as the firm but fair guardian of decorum. You have to be firm with that type, she said, polishing a champagne flute. Give them an inch and they take a mile. The nerve to accuse me of being discriminatory. I was protecting the integrity of our brand. Brenda, a young woman working her way through college, nodded meekly. but she felt a pit in her stomach. The woman and her little boy had seemed so nice. The first sign of trouble came about an hour later. The station manager for Aura Airlines, a harried-looking man named Frank, rushed into the lounge, his face pale. "Carolyn, what the hell happened in here earlier?" he demanded, his voice low and urgent. Carolyn was taken aback. "What do you mean I handled a small issue with a non-compliant passenger?" "It was nothing." "Nothing," Frank hissed. "We just got a priority notice from the FAA. They've flagged us for an immediate ramp and facilities inspection. They're requesting all our training logs for lounge and gate personnel effective immediately. They specifically cited an incident involving lounge management." "That was you, wasn't it?" Carolyn's smugness evaporated, replaced by a flicker of fear. The FAA, over a lounge complaint. "That's insane. She must have known someone. I don't care who she knew." Frank snapped. "I now have to spend my Friday night digging up personnel files because you couldn't just let a woman and her kid sit here quietly. Get me the incident report you filed." I didn't file one." Carolyn stammered. It wasn't that serious. Frank looked at her as if she'd just confessed to treason. "You had a passenger removed by security and you didn't file a report. Are you incompetent? Get out of my sight. I have to call corporate." Frank hurried away, leaving Carolyn standing alone by the bar, the polished champagne flute suddenly feeling very heavy in her hand. Up in the gleaming steel and glass tower of Aura Airlines' corporate headquarters in Chicago, CEO Richard Sterling was enjoying a celebratory scotch. The company had just posted record quarterly profits. His phone buzzed with a call from his chief operating officer. Richard, the COO, said, his voice tight with anxiety. "We have a problem at LAX." Richard Sterling, a man who saw problems as mere speed bumps for his private jet to taxi over, took a sip of his Macallan 25. "What kind of problem, Weather Numb?" "It's the FAA. They've initiated a surprise compliance inspection. They're on site, and it sounds targeted. It originated from a passenger complaint." Sterling scoffed. "The FAA doesn't launch a full inspection over a passenger complaint. Someone's uncle must have gotten a cold cup of coffee. Tell Frank to handle it. Give the passenger a voucher for a free flight. Make it go away." "It's not that simple," Richard, the COO, insisted. "The initial report I'm getting is that the passenger in question was an African-American woman with her child, and our lounge manager had her thrown out." Richard Sterling paused the glass halfway to his lips. This was a different kind of problem. A PR problem. Still, it was manageable. Find the woman, apologize, give her first-class tickets for life. And tell the lounge manager to get her story straight. We back our people. This is just a shakedown. It'll blow over. He hung up the phone and took another long drink of his scotch. He was Richard Sterling. He ran a multi-billion-dollar airline. He had a team of lawyers that could make hurricanes apologize for delaying flights. No single passenger, no matter how offended, was going to cause him any real trouble. He had no idea that the woman he was so casually dismissing wasn't just a passenger anymore. She was Investigator Hayes, and she was just getting started. The FAA's airport district office at LAX was the antithesis of the Summit Club. There was no bergamot-scented air, no plush leather, no hushed reverence. This was a place built for function, not fantasy. The air smelled of industrial-grade coffee, old paper, and the faint metallic tang of overworked servers. Its beauty lay not in aesthetics, but in its absolute unyielding purpose. The fluorescent lights hummed with a steady, monotonous drone, illuminating rows of grey cubicles and beige conference rooms. For Anaya Hayes, this sterile environment was a sanctuary. Here, assumptions died, and only facts survived. Prejudice had no place in a flowchart. By 9 p.m., the conference room she had commandeered had become a war room. The large central table was littered with open laptops, color-coded evidence binders, and half-empty cups of coffee. Her ad hoc team, assembled with remarkable speed by David Chen, was a well-oiled machine of regulatory oversight. Ben Carter, an avionics specialist with 20 years of field experience and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite, was pacing by the window. His expertise was in the hardware, the physical mechanics of flight, but his real talent was sniffing out the human error that so often caused mechanical failure. He'd seen every shortcut, every lazy sign-off, every excuse in the book. Across from him, Maria Flores, a records analyst half his age, but with twice his digital fluency, was a blur of motion at her keyboard. Her domain was the endless labyrinth of digital databases, training logs and security protocols. She could navigate encrypted personnel files and cross-reference access logs with the grace of a concert pianist. Anaya stood at the head of the table, a general directing her troops. The personal sting of the afternoon's events had been compartmentalized, transformed into pure cold fuel for the investigation. Her son Leo was safe and happy in a nearby hotel, looked after by a trusted FAA administrative professional who knew how to handle last-minute assignments. Leo thought they were on a secret spy mission, a story that was not far from the truth. With his safety assured, Anaya's focus was absolute. "Let's start at the source of the infection," Anaya said, her voice cutting through the hum of the room. "Carolyn Finch. Maria, I want her entire employee file, training commendations, complaints, and especially her continuing education records. I want to know who trained this woman and who signed off on it." On it, Maria said, her fingers dancing across the keys. A few clicks, and she was past the firewalls of Aura's HR portal. "Okay, pulling up Finch Carolyn A., hired 6 years ago, promoted to lounge manager 2 years ago. A few minor passenger complaints, all dismissed by station management as customer seeking compensation. Nothing major until today." "Dig deeper," Ben grunted from the window. "The rot is always underneath the shiny surface. I'm looking at her training certifications." Maria continued, her brow furrowing in concentration. "She's listed as compliant on all fronts. Completed her biannual ADA refresher, annual security protocol update. And here it is. Conflict resolution and passenger rights, 8-hour course, mandatory for all management-level staff. Certification date, June 12th of this year. Signed off by the LAX station manager, Frank Gable." Anaya felt a flicker of something a predator's instinct. It felt too neat, too perfect. An all-day, 8-hour course on a single date. Pull up her work schedule and terminal access logs for June 12th. Maria, let's see if the record matches reality. "Good call," Ben added. "I've seen entire crews certified for safety drills they never attended because the airline didn't want to pay the overtime." Maria's typing became more intense. She opened a new window, her eyes scanning lines of raw data, timestamps, access point IDs, employee numbers. The room was silent for a full minute, the only sound the frantic clicking of her keys. Then she stopped. She leaned back in her chair and let out a low whistle. "Oh, she's dirty," Maria said, a grim smile on her face. "She's absolutely dirty. Anaya, you were right." On June 12th, the day of her mandatory 8-hour off-site training, Carolyn Finch swiped her badge to access the Summit Club in Terminal 7 at 8:03 a.m. She swiped out at 6:47 p.m. She never left the airport. The sign-off sheet from the training facility was a ghost signature. Station Manager Gable rubber-stamped a certification for a training she never attended. This was the first crack in the dam. It was a concrete, undeniable, and felonious act. Falsifying a federally mandated training record was not a customer service issue. It was a federal offense. It establishes a pattern, Anaya said, her voice hardening. A culture of convenience over compliance, deceit over duty. It starts with one manager, one falsified form, and it spreads. Then let's see if that pattern extends to their contractors. Pull up the security guard. Ben moved to his own laptop, his large fingers surprisingly nimble. Name was George Keller, according to the preliminary report. Works for a third-party contractor, Global Secure Solutions. Aura is their biggest client on the West Coast. He accessed the National Security Credential database. Okay, his CEDA badge is active and valid. That grants him access to the secure areas of the airport. But that's just the key to the kingdom. It doesn't give him the right to touch the crown jewels. Look for his specific engagement certifications, Anaya instructed. Use of force, physical passenger management. De-escalation. The contractor provides the training, but the airline is federally mandated to ensure every contractor they use on-site is fully compliant and certified before every single shift. Ben's face grew grimmer as he scrolled. This is bad, Anaya. This is really, really bad. He turned his laptop screen for her to see. He highlighted a line item. His certificate for physical passenger management, the one that legally allows him to lay hands on a passenger even under instruction, expired 6 weeks ago. Maria gasped. They had an uncertified guard physically remove a woman and her child. It gets worse, Ben said, pointing to another flag on the screen. Global Secure's system sent an automated notification of the pending expiration to Aura's compliance office 3 times, and Aura's own internal system should have put an automatic hold on his eligibility for that specific duty. Someone at Aura either deliberately ignored the warnings or their entire compliance verification system is a catastrophic failure. Either way, they are so far out of compliance, it's not even funny. The pieces locked into place, forming a terrifying picture. An arrogant, untrained hot manager with a history of falsifying records initiates a conflict. She then calls upon an uncertified security guard to illegally enforce her prejudiced decision, and the station manager, the next link in the chain of command, is complicit in the original training fraud. This wasn't one rotten apple. The entire barrel was contaminated. This is a direct violation of 49 CFR Part 1542, the Airport Security Program. Anaya stated, her voice resonating with the full weight of her office. It's a willful disregard for the fundamental safety and security protocols that allow an airline to operate. They put an unqualified individual in a direct security role with the public. What if I hadn't been me? What if it had been someone who panicked, who fought back? The potential for escalation for real harm was enormous. She picked up her encrypted phone, her movements calm and deliberate. She dialed David Chen. As she laid out the findings, the falsified training, the expired certification, the ignored warnings, her voice was stripped of all emotion. She presented the case like a surgeon describing a terminal disease, clinical, precise, and irrefutable. On the other end of the line, David listened in stunned silence. He had expected negligence. This was bordering on criminal conspiracy. When she finished, he let out a long, heavy sigh. "Anaya, you understand the gravity of these findings and what they compel us to do," he said, his voice heavy. "This isn't about a fine. This isn't about a warning letter. This is a fundamental betrayal of the public trust and a mockery of their air operator certificate. You have documented a complete breakdown in their safety management system at a major international hub." He paused, the weight of his next words hanging in the silence. "You have my full authorization. Issue a temporary suspension of air operator certificate for Aura Airlines effective immediately for all operations originating from or terminating at LAX. I want a full top-to-bottom, no stone unturned audit before we even consider letting them fly again. I'll notify the National Command Center. Draft the order. Let's shut them down." The command was given. A death sentence, even if temporary, for an airline's operations. Anaya hung up and looked at her team. A grim understanding passed between them. "Let's write the order," she said. At 11:47 p.m., 2 FAA officials, flanked by 2 uniformed officers of the LAPD Airport Police, walked through the secure doors of the Aura Airlines Operations Control Center at LAX. The OCC was the airline's nerve center, a vast, dimly lit room, dominated by a wall of screens displaying flight paths, weather patterns, and crew schedules. Dozens of dispatchers and coordinators spoke in low, urgent tones, managing the complex ballet of a global airline. The station manager, Frank Gable, was in the center of the room, already stressed from the initial document requests. When he saw the FAA officials approaching with police, his heart plummeted. The lead official, a tall, imposing man, didn't waste time with pleasantries. He handed Frank a single-page document. Frank's hands trembled as he read the bolded heading, "Temporary suspension of air operator certificate, pursuant to 49 USC 44709. He read it again, the words blurring. "Suspend. You're grounding us." The entire hub. Numb. No. This is a mistake. It's a misunderstanding over a lounge issue. So the lounge issue was merely the tip of an iceberg of non-compliance. The FAA official stated, his voice calm but unyielding. The only mistake was made by Aura Airlines. Your authority to operate from this airport is hereby suspended. This is not a negotiation. Notify your aircraft. Begin deplaning all passengers on outbound flights. All inbound aircraft are to be held at the gate upon arrival. Nothing moves. The words echoed through the suddenly quiet OCC. A dispatcher, hearing the exchange, ripped off his headset. He said, "We're grounded, the whole fleet." Panic erupted. Phones began ringing. Alarms on consoles started to chime as flight plans were abruptly cancelled by the tower. On the tarmac, pilots preparing for takeoff to New York, Tokyo, and London received the shocking, unprecedented command over their radios. Aura 22, Aura 6, Aura 81. All Aura flights return to gate. I repeat, all Aura flights return to gate. By order of the FAA, you are grounded. In the terminals, the first sign of the apocalypse came on the giant departure boards, the entire column under the Aura Airlines logo. A sea of blue on-time indicators began to blink. Then one by one, they turned to a horrifying stark red. Cancelled. A collective gasp went through the crowd of waiting passengers, followed by a rising wave of confusion, then anger. In his $30 million penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, Richard Sterling was ripped from a deep sleep by his phone vibrating violently on the marble nightstand. It was his COO, and his voice was a panicked shriek. "They did it, Richard. The FAA grounded us at LAX. They've shut down the entire hub. It's a total suspension." "They... what?" Sterling roared, bolting upright and sending his $1,000 silk sheets pooling on the floor. He felt a surge of disbelief, then white-hot rage. On what grounds? What possible grounds could they have? Systemic safety and security violations. The COO yelled over the phone. "They're citing falsified training records, use of UNSI-certified security personnel. A complete operational failure. It's already on Bloomberg and CNN. The stock is hemorrhaging in after-hours trading." Sterling, dazed, grabbed his tablet. The headlines were brutal, apocalyptic. FAA issues. Unprecedented grounding of Aura Airlines at LAX hub. Amid shocking safety probe. He watched in horror as a graph showed his company's stock price falling off a cliff. Each second represented millions of dollars in vaporized value. "Get the entire legal team on a conference call. Now!" Sterling screamed, his voice raw. "Get me the head of the FAA. Get me the Secretary of Transportation on the phone. I want to know who is responsible for this. I want a name." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and when the COO spoke again, his voice was hollow. "We have a name. Richard. The lead investigator on the FAA report. The one who initiated the compliance check. Her name is Dr. Anaya Hayes." The name meant nothing to Richard Sterling. It was just a name. It was impossible for him to connect this corporate cataclysm, this financial Armageddon, to a quiet black woman and her young son. The woman his employee had deemed unworthy of a seat in a VIP lounge just hours before. The problem he had casually ordered his subordinates to make go away. From her hotel room window, overlooking the now eerily silent Terminal 7, Anaya Hayes watched. The massive, beautiful jet symbols of human ingenuity and her life's work sat motionless and dark on the tarmac. Their wings were clipped not by a storm or a mechanical fault, but by a failure of character that had been allowed to fester into a systemic disease. There was no joy in her heart, no thrill of victory. Only the heavy, somber satisfaction of a duty fulfilled. The system she was sworn to uphold had been critically compromised, and she had done her job. The grounding was not the end. It was the beginning of the reckoning. The grounding of a major airline hub is not a quiet event. It is a financial and logistical hydrogen bomb, and the fallout for Aura Airlines was immediate, catastrophic, and brutally public. The first 48 hours were a masterclass in corporate hemorrhaging. Every 6 hours, the LAX hub remained inert. The company was torching over $100 million in lost revenue hotel vouchers for thousands of stranded passengers' crew, repositioning nightmares and parking fees for their fleet of now useless multi-million-dollar aircraft. The stock market, when it officially opened on Monday morning, was a bloodbath. Aura's stock, Aura, opened down 38%, wiping out nearly $2 billion of shareholder value in the first 90 minutes of trading. It was the single worst day in the company's 40-year history. For CEO Richard Sterling, his Chicago penthouse had transformed from a symbol of his success into a gilded cool. He was in a perpetual state of crisis management, his days and nights a blur of apoplectic video calls with his board of directors. 2 billion. Richard screamed a furious hedge fund manager from New York who sat on his board. We've been wiped out because some glorified waitress got her feelings hurt. How do you let this happen? You told us you had it handled. This is beyond that now. Mark Sterling yelled back, his voice hoarse, his Savile Row suit jacket discarded on a chair. This isn't about a customer complaint. The FAA has documentation. They have proof of willful negligence. My legal team says if we fight this in court, we'll not only lose, but the discovery process could uncover things that would put us out of business entirely. His general counsel, Isabel Rossi, a woman whose pragmatism was as sharp and cold as a shard of glass, confirmed this in a separate, more terrifying call. Richard, you need to understand. The FAA has a near-perfect conviction rate when they issue a safety grounding of this magnitude. They don't move unless their case is ironclad. We have a manager who falsified federal training documents. That's a felony. We have an uncertified security guard who committed assault by illegally touching a passenger under our direction. We have a station manager who was complicit. This isn't a battle. This is a surrender. The only question is the terms. The source of this corporate apocalypse, Carolyn Finch, was blissfully unaware of the multi-billion-dollar chaos she had unleashed. She had spent the weekend complaining to her friends about the entitled people one has to deal with. Her summons came on Saturday morning via a terse, mandatory video conference invitation. She joined the call from her beige living room, arranging her severe blonde bob and adopting an expression of beleaguered professionalism. On the screen were Sterling, his COO, and Isabel Rossi. They did not look happy. Ms. Finch Sterling, began his voice deceptively calm. I want you to walk me through the incident on Friday afternoon. Every single detail from the moment Dr. Hayes entered your lounge. Carolyn recounted her story, the same self-aggrandizing narrative she had perfected in her own mind. She painted herself as the guardian of brand integrity, a firm but fair manager, protecting the serene atmosphere from an aggressive and uncooperative individual who didn't seem to belong. When she finished, Isabel Rossi spoke, her voice precise and surgical. Thank you, Ms. Finch. Let's clarify a few points. You stated that you were upholding company standards. The training course titled Conflict Resolution and Passenger Rights, which you certified you attended on June 12th, outlines specific de-escalation protocols. Can you tell us which of those protocols you followed? Well, I used a firm tone as instructed to establish authority. Carolyn began. That's not a protocol. Ms. Finch, that's an attitude, Isabel cut in. The protocol calls for verification of credentials through approved channels, and if a dispute arises, you are to contact the station manager, not security. You did neither. Furthermore, we have terminal access logs that show you were working a full shift in the Summit Club on the day of that training. This means the federal document bearing your signature is fraudulent. That act alone is a felony punishable by fines and prison time. Do you understand the legal jeopardy you are in personally? Carolyn's face, smug moments before, crumbled. The color drained away, leaving a pasty, white mask of fear. Frank Gable, my manager. He said it was fine. He signed off on it. Everyone does it. Frank? Gable has been suspended and is pending termination for his role in this catastrophe. Sterling interjected, his voice dropping to a low growl. And now, let's discuss the security guard. Did you, before instructing him to physically remove a passenger and her minor child, verify his certification for that specific duty? That's not my job, Carolyn squeaked, her voice cracking. He works for the security company. He was in uniform. I'm supposed to trust that he's qualified. That was the final straw for Richard at Sterling. The dam of his composure broke, and a tidal wave of pure, unrestrained fury washed through him. He leaned into his camera, his face a grotesque mask of rage, his voice a roar that seemed to shake the screen. Your job. Ms. Finch was to manage a lounge. Your job was to pour champagne and smile. Your job was to use the most basic, rudimentary common sense, but you couldn't do that instead. Your petty prejudice, your pathetic need to wield some imaginary power, has cost this company billions of dollars. You are without a single shred of doubt the single most destructive and expensive employee in the entire history of aviation. You didn't just insult a passenger, you assaulted a Federal Aviation Administration safety inspector, and you did it in front of her child. He was breathing heavily, his face purple. Effective this second, your employment with Aura Airlines is terminated. Security is on its way to your home to collect all company property. Our legal team will be in touch regarding your falsification of federal documents. You are a pariah. Get out! He slammed his finger on the button ending the call and erasing her shocked, tear-streaked face from his screen. Carolyn Finch's free fall was swift and merciless. Fired in spectacular disgrace and facing a looming federal inquiry, she was blacklisted. The following week, shell-shocked and desperate to escape, she tried to use a flight pass to visit her sister in Florida. At the airport, she attempted to enter the VIP lounge of another airline with whom Aura had a reciprocal agreement. The agent scanned her credentials and looked up his expression cold and professional. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "I can't grant you access. Your name has been flagged on the inter-airline security database for creating a disturbance and involvement in fraudulent activity. We have to maintain a certain standard of safety and security in our lounge." The words, so chillingly similar to her own, hung in the air. Humiliated, she was forced to turn around and perform the walk of shame back to the cacophony of the main terminal. The burning eyes of strangers following her every step. Her karma had arrived right on schedule. With the initial source of the rot cauterized, Sterling knew his only option was capitulation, but a press release and a check wouldn't fix this. This required a level of humility he had never before accessed. "Isabel," he said, his voice now quiet and defeated. "Get me a meeting with Dr. Hayes. I don't want to talk to her boss or their lawyers. I need to talk to her, face to face." "Richard." "That is wildly unorthodox," Isabel cautioned. "She's the lead federal investigator. Any direct communication could be perceived as tampering or undue influence. I'm not going to influence her." Sterling replied, the last vestiges of his arrogance gone. "I'm going to beg." It took 2 days of delicate, high-level negotiation, but David Chen eventually approved the meeting on the strict condition that it take place on neutral ground and that Anaya could terminate it at any moment. The meeting was held in a soulless beige conference room at an airport hotel. Richard Sterling, the titan of industry, arrived 20 minutes early. He wore his power suit, but it seemed to hang on him, his tie slightly askew. He looked smaller. Anaya Hayes walked in at the scheduled time, not a minute early or late. She was alone, dressed in a simple dark navy blue suit. She carried a slim leather portfolio. There was no trace of the tired mother from the lounge. In her place was a woman who radiated an aura of absolute, unshakable authority. She did not look at Sterling with anger or triumph, but with the cool, appraising gaze of a regulator examining a piece of broken machinery. Sterling stood reflexively. "Dr. Hayes, thank you for seeing me." He gestured to a chair, but she remained standing. "Mr. Sterling." He began, his voice hoarse, the carefully rehearsed words catching in his throat. I want to apologize. What happened to you, to your son? It was a disgusting, inexcusable failure on every conceivable level. It was born of prejudice and ignorance, and it happened under my leadership. There are no excuses. I am profoundly and deeply sorry. Anaya listened, her expression unmoving. She gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. "Your apology is a matter for your own conscience, Mr. Sterling. It is noted. However, my personal feelings are irrelevant. We are here because Aura Airlines has demonstrated a critical failure of its safety management system, which compromises the integrity of the national airspace system that thousands of my colleagues and I are sworn to protect." The statement was like a splash of ice water. She had effortlessly shifted the frame from a personal grievance to a matter of federal oversight. He was not here to appease a wronged customer. He was here as a supplicant to the regulatory body that held his company's life in its hands. "Yes," he stammered. "Of course, I've seen the findings. They are indefensible. I didn't come here to argue. I came to ask what we need to do, not just to satisfy the FAA's requirements, but to fix the culture that allowed this to happen, to earn back the right to fly." This was the opening. This was the moment where accountability could be forged into action. Anaya walked to the table and placed her leather portfolio down. She opened it and slid a single sheet of paper across the polished wood. The official FAA report outlines the regulatory mandates. She said, her voice clear and firm. "A complete, transparent audit of all training records for all 14,000 employees based at this hub. Immediate recertification of all security and customer-facing personnel. A complete overhaul of your third-party contractor verification system. Those are the legal requirements. They are non-negotiable." She tapped the paper she had just given him. "This is what is required to fix the culture." Sterling picked it up. It was not a list of fines. It was a list of actions. 1. A full-page public apology. To be run in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Los Angeles Times. It was to be signed by Richard Sterling himself and explicitly detail the discriminatory nature of the incident, naming Carolyn Finch as the instigator, and publicly accepting full corporate responsibility. 2. The Phoenix Program. A mandatory company-wide retraining initiative on diversity inclusion, unconscious bias, and de-escalation. It was to be designed and administered by a respected third-party consultant approved by the FAA and audited for the next 5 years. 3. The Leo Hayes Aviation Grant. The establishment of a $5 million perpetual charitable foundation funded entirely by Aura Airlines. Its mission to provide scholarships, flight school tuition, and STEM education. Opportunities for children from underprivileged and minority communities, fostering the next generation of diverse pilots, engineers, and aviation professionals. 4. Independent oversight. For a period of 3 years, an independent diversity and inclusion officer, jointly approved by Aura and the FAA, would be embedded at the executive level, with the authority to review hiring and promotion practices and veto any decisions not aligned with the new company mandate. Sterling read the list, his face a mixture of shock and disbelief. This wasn't a penalty. It was a restructuring of his company's soul. The apology was a public humiliation. The training was a logistical and financial nightmare. The independent officer was a direct challenge to his authority. But it was the third item that struck him like a physical blow. The Leo Hayes Aviation Grant. It took the anonymous child from the incident report and gave him a name and a legacy that would be forever intertwined with Aura's redemption. It was brilliant, it was devastating, and it was non-negotiable. He looked up from the paper, a new grudging respect in his eyes. He was not dealing with a victim. He was dealing with a visionary. "This is extensive," he managed to say. "This is the minimum required to begin building a corporate culture where a black woman and her 8-year-old son can sit in one of your premium lounges without being treated as a threat." Anaya stated, her voice devoid of malice but filled with an iron resolve. "This is the path forward. There is no other. You will do this, and I will recommend to Administrator Chen that your suspension be lifted once the initial regulatory mandates are met, or you will refuse, and you can explain to your shareholders why your second busiest hub remains a ghost town indefinitely. There was no choice to make. It was the most brutal corporate surrender in modern aviation history." "We'll do it," Sterling said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "We will do every single thing on this list." The aftermath was a whirlwind of frantic activity. The grounding was lifted after 5 excruciatingly costly days, but Aura Airlines was a changed company. The humiliating apology ran in the papers. The Phoenix program was launched, and the Leo Hayes Aviation Grant was announced, with Dr. Anaya Hayes accepting a position on its independent advisory board. A few weeks later, Anaya and Leo finally made it to Hawaii. They flew a different airline. As she sat on the warm, white sand of Lanikai Beach, watching Leo's small figure joyfully chasing the turquoise waves, he came running back to her, his face bright with excitement, a perfect seashell in his hand. "Mommy," he said, looking up at her with the unfiltered sincerity only a child possesses. "Are you famous now? Grandma showed me your picture on her computer." Anaya pulled him into a tight hug, breathing in the salty air and the scent of his sun-warmed hair. She looked out at the endless expanse of the Pacific, then up at the brilliant blue sky, a sky she had fought to keep safe. "No, my sweet boy," she whispered into his ear. "Mummy's not famous. Mummy just has a very important job." And she had to remind some very powerful people how to do theirs with decency and respect for everyone. That's all. She had faced down the ugly, insidious monster of prejudice, not with a roar, but with the quiet, unyielding power of the rule book. She hadn't sought revenge. She had meticulously engineered a reckoning, and in doing so she had planted the seeds of change, ensuring that the skies she and her son so loved might one day be a little more welcoming for everyone. Anaya's story is a powerful reminder that the fight against prejudice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's won through quiet competence and unshakable integrity. She didn't just get an apology. She forced an entire corporation to confront its own ugliness and change from the inside out. By using the very system she was sworn to protect, she turned a moment of personal humiliation into a catalyst for systemic reform. This wasn't revenge, it was a reckoning, a demonstration that true power lies not in status or wealth, but in knowledge, authority, and the courage to wield it justly. What do you think? Was her response justified? Was it too harsh or exactly what was needed? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If stories like this, where justice finds its way against incredible odds, resonate with you, please do us a huge favor and hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe for more true stories of incredible karma. Your support helps us continue to bring these powerful narratives to light. Thank you for watching.